Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Miller, and I'm going to talk to you today about technology infrastructure audit in designing a plan of our current technology usage and how we can develop a sustainable, systematic process district-wide. First, I want to talk about the district committee members for this audit. We're looking at our Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction. We would have our finance officers. We would have a director of management information systems of security and safety, our co-directors in the technology department, a professional development coordinator, ESOL and diversity director, various secondary and elementary administration, as well as secondary and elementary certified teachers. Community members, we're looking at the Board of Education, the Community Site Council, and then, of course, parents through this process. Step one, really establishing the current reality and goal setting. As we would for any content area, when we do a gap analysis on the current reality, we want to do and follow and mirror the same process for technology. So first steps in planning, we have some pre-task information that we want to take care of. We want to form that committee. We have a committee of district people, of internal and external stakeholders, of district community members or district leaders, and then community members, teachers, and administration. Looking at consulting with Department of Education for guidance and what those technology standards are and how to embed those pieces in there. And then again, looking at Executive Director of Management Information, establishing that current reality, like I said, assess the capacity, the infrastructure and devices that we currently have in place. Our district several years ago had one-to-one iPads for students district-wide, K through 12th grade. That is slowly getting out of the district because of how old those iPads are. And they're slowly putting in laptops for 3rd through 12th grade. Now we're looking at Chromebooks for kindergarten through 5th grade. So those pieces are already starting in motion, but really making sure that we have the devices that are working for our students currently, and teachers as well. And then looking at the future demands of what that might be. Looking at the future and knowing what has came our way with the devices we've used, and things getting broke, etc. Step 2, acquiring high-speed connectivity for all schools and facilities. This is an area that sometimes can be challenging because district-wide, it's such a big district in Dodge City that we want to ensure that connectivity for students, teachers, staff is available and ready to go each day. Majority of our content and curriculum has a digital platform as well. So to ensure that everyone can access that when they need to access that. Another piece to think about as well is when we do state testing and CALPA testing, we need those devices to work and we need them to be ready to go, updated, etc. Again, kind of going a little bit deeper into this, COVID's taught us a lot with the use of bandwidth and hotspots, etc., across our district. And not only that, is that readily available for students that do not have access to technology at home. Want to make sure that people are able to connect to their devices when at school, if it is a phone, if needed. And then also looking at kind of the costs and monitoring and the maintenance of the networks and the devices, and see where that funds could come out of human capital if needed. Step 3, situating connectivity throughout schools and facilities. Looking at this area was a big piece in making sure that each building has that connectivity, like I talked about. The bandwidth is big enough for that school. We have a lot of buildings in our district: 8 elementaries, 2 middle schools, and 1 high school. The high school alone houses about 2,100 students. That alone, not just connecting to devices, but the phones that they use, the video streaming that takes place. We want to make sure that there's enough bandwidth for the technology to be used the way it needs to be used, for teachers and staff and students to access for learning taking place during the day. Looking at electricity, external outlets within the building, within the classrooms, how is that being used, wiring to connect to bandwidth areas. We look at security systems, how is that being used to monitor the data walls, the firewalls taking place within the devices, and making sure that there's no big surges within the buildings or the devices because of the amount of power or bandwidth that we're putting through there. So we want to make sure through this process that we're vetting all these things in each department, in each building, and going through and carefully making sure that we're able to do this with this size district. Again, continuing into maximizing that bandwidth, prioritizing traffic, and ensuring handling of demands throughout the day. Security, that's a big thing, and making sure that different apps are not being used throughout the day, and making sure we're monitoring those pieces with students, staff, etc. So cybersecurity is a big piece. We want to make sure through this process that we vet as well. I'm going to get in talking about policies, but what are the board policies currently, or what do we need to make sure that we put in place to help ensure that there's policies in place for misuse of technology. Step 4, selecting, purchasing, and rolling out the device district-wide. I talked about this earlier in the presentation, but making sure that there's a sustainable and systematic process when we roll out technology. Considerations to make sure when we allow teachers and students to try devices before deciding and purchasing. When those iPads were purchased one-on-one, there was no really trying out the device prior to. Looking at going into the future, we've purchased a lot of laptops for 3rd through 12th grade, but now we're looking at Chromebooks. The technology department with our new co-facilitators or co-directors are looking at Chromebooks, and they're selecting different teachers at different grade levels to pilot those Chromebooks, and there's 2 different versions of those Chromebooks for students to use and pilot in the classroom. Comparing costs and devices, this is a big piece when you look at purchasing devices. What is got good reviews when purchasing devices, but what looks like it could last a long time if needed. Laptops versus tablets, I've talked about. Battery life, durability, these are all things we need to make sure we look at. When you look at elementary world, those devices do not go home, but once you get into the secondary pieces, not at secondary middle school, but secondary high school, those students take a lot of those devices home. If we need to provide devices at home, we want to make sure that those devices we give them are durable and can withstand any kind of dropping or anything like that, etc. When we look at purchasing, again, going into the funding, where is the funding coming from? Making sure that we are working with the companies that we're purchasing devices for. Is there any kind of trading and warranty on the devices when we look at a district-wide process with devices? Are we going to get discounts if we buy a higher volume of devices? Discounts for schools? What is the difference between larger schools and smaller schools and the cost when purchasing devices? Is there any grants out there that are available for districts to use towards technology? And then really looking at where can we save money on open educational resources and licensing costs as far as digital platforms when we look at resources being taught through those digital components using the devices. The rollout, I think this is the biggest part to this whole plan, is we've provided that committee goes through a lot of this work that I've talked about, is making sure and tying up all those loose ends and vetting all those processes and structures throughout the district. But then what's that look like when we have that all set? Is how do we roll out the district processes, structures with technology? How do we provide teachers, students, and staff professional development? That's why I added those district leaders on there. How do we provide professional development in using the devices, using the technology? Not everyone is comfortable with using technology or brand new devices. It takes time, even for a person that feels comfortable with a device. It takes a little bit of time to understand how that new piece works, new piece of equipment works. How does it work within the digital platforms that we offer, like ClassLink or any of the other ELA, math, social studies, science, digital platforms that we offer through ClassLink. And then again, how do we replicate that in the buildings as far as providing that support for everyone in those areas? Step 5, communicating responsible use and privacy and upkeep of devices. I've talked a little bit about this in the presentation, but really making sure that students understand that is district property, building property, but how do we take care of it? How are we responsible in using the device in the classroom, using it at home, and what is that process in case things are broken? With the device as far as teachers, students, staff, etc. Making sure that we have a Responsible Use and Privacy Act, Responsible Use and Privacy Notice for teachers and students and parents, all community members when looking at devices. That teaching digital citizenship through our buildings should be incorporated and embedded into our not only teaching content, but how do we use devices appropriately when using them for teaching. Board policies. I think this is the big piece when you look at rolling out devices, rolling out new pieces for teachers and students, is what is acceptable use for our teachers and students, and what are our safeguards in case things get ruined. How do we ensure that there's policies in place as far as fees? If internet safety is broken, what are our penalties for the improper use district-wide? We look at student data restrictions. We have a lot of things that are very tight on the back end support of technology and making sure that student data, etc., is not available for just anyone. ClassLink has provided that security safety not only for teachers but students as well. But then really looking at, again, I talked about those safeguards. How do we measure whether or not it's being used appropriately at the district level, building level, and classroom usage? And then what kind of apps are available that provide that online activity safeguards to make sure students are not getting in inappropriate places within the internet, browsers, etc. Lost or damaged. I've talked a lot about this piece. Password protections. What's that look like? Again, ClassLink that we have through our district provides password protection. It's virtually impossible for anybody to break those codes because it is set up through the system district-wide for each individual student. Teaching student responsibility with those devices. How do you take care of them? I think a big piece that we don't always do is provide carrying cases for students, teachers, and staff to put those devices into a nice case that will be taken care of and not be broken if dropped by accident. Paying for the devices if damaged, what's that look like? Broken screens, maybe providing some insurance options through the district for parents if wanted and needed. If we have to bring devices home, what would that look like to help kind of alleviate some of that cost if